Welcome, this is Jim, host of the Faith Influencer podcast, where we're going to dive into discussions on faith's role in everyday life, from navigating blended families to overcoming challenges. I'm a husband, a father, a Bible teacher, an advocate for applying faith to everyday life. So tune in as I share personal stories, valuable insights, and practical wisdom. Welcome to Faith Influencer. This is Jim Cunningham. I want to talk to you today about disappointment and overcoming disappointment. Now, I am talking really personal today because this was an initial struggle that I went through, and it took me a while to get through it when I went through a divorce. The weight of disappointment can feel so heavy at times. It's like you're carrying a storm cloud over your heart, and it will not go away. But I'm telling you, it's a completely natural emotion that you go through in the midst of a divorce. But if you're not careful, you don't know how to navigate that disappointment. I didn't for a long time. Thankfully, I am on the other side of that now, even though flashes still come to my mind about the disappointment. I'm going to explain it to you in a moment. But now I know how to navigate that a little better, and I want to help you navigate the world of disappointment. I think maybe it would help if I gave you a little background of where I'm coming from. I started out in ministry when I was 18 years old, literally started pastoring when I was 18 years old, this little country church. And it was the love of my life. That's what I had intended to do my whole life. I did that for 20 years. I mean, everything from Bible school to seminary to my graduate degree in theology, on and on. That was my world. That's all I was ever going to do. Then I experienced the breakup of my family. And when I experienced the breakup and divorce in my family, it's like you took my dreams that started when I was very young and you just broke them in half. All my dreams were broken. I felt so disappointed, not just that I went through that, but disappointed in myself. And it didn't matter who's at fault, who's not at fault. The disappointment was still heavy. I felt so disappointed that I went through that, experienced that, especially as someone who was in ministry, that I felt like that God took me, this is how I felt, that God took me and put me on a shelf and was through with me, was finished with me. And I carried that disappointment for a long time and did not know how to navigate it. And then I found myself with my two daughters starting over. And I had to get it together because I had two daughters. They were young teenagers, just me and them. And to navigate that, I had to learn to deal with my disappointment and not carry that cloud because it was going to affect them and their years ahead of them and growing up. So I had to navigate that. I had help navigating that. You've heard me maybe mention before Lanny, who was a counselor who helped me navigate that. But I want to give you just a few of those points to help you navigate that. If you're finding it difficult to overcome the disappointment of having gone through a broken marriage, let me help you by outlining some steps that I want you to take. Number one, I want you to acknowledge your feelings about this. This is very difficult to get honest. Now, I came from a different perspective because I was a pastor of a church, and as the pastor of the church, I was the one that had it all together, right? I was the one that other people came to. Now I had to acknowledge that I didn't. I had to acknowledge that I was broken myself and that I needed help. It's very difficult to do that. It's very difficult to be strong. It's really, maybe some for guys too, it's very difficult to allow yourself to feel emotions. I'm telling you that God gave men emotions as well as women emotions, but it's more difficult for us sometimes to experience it. I'm going to throw out a word that has become a word that has helped me a lot, and I hate the word, but it's very important. It's the word vulnerable. I've discovered that I'm attracted listening to people when I hear them speak, like other pastors or speakers or whatever, when they're vulnerable. I didn't used to think that. I used to run from vulnerability. I used to think that vulnerability looked like weakness. But then I discovered that it's just the opposite. I discovered that being open and vulnerable about your own faults and brokenness and emotions and feelings actually is way more attractive than the guy who has to act like he has it all together when he doesn't. So vulnerability became very important. So I'm asking you this. I'm asking you that if you're going to navigate the world of disappointment, then you have to learn, first of all, to acknowledge your feelings. And to do that, you've got to be vulnerable. So I'm going to give you one piece of instruction here, advice, counseling, that's going to change your life. But it may confront you a little bit in the beginning, and here it is. My question for you is, who do you have in your life that has permission to speak into your life? Who do you have in your life that you've given permission to be critical of you? Who do you have that you trust enough that you've said to them, if you see something in my life that's going astray or that doesn't look right, you can call me out on it? Who do you have in your life that you've given permission? Now that causes you to be very vulnerable to give someone that permission. I'm going to suggest that you need 3 or 4 people in your life that you give permission to. Now, that's not easy, but it's got to be someone you trust. It's got to be someone you love, because if someone's going to be critical of you, call you out on something, you have to trust that person. So answer the question again, who do you have in your life that you've given permission to speak into your life, good or bad? And if you, like most men, if you answer saying, I have no one, I've never given permission to anyone, then I'm going to encourage you to start praying about who you can meet with that you love and trust, and ask them or give them permission to speak into your life. That's very, very important. It helps you acknowledge your feelings and deal with the disappointment that you're experiencing, and it all comes from learning to be vulnerable. So that's the first one, okay? Here's the second thing. It goes along with the first one. In dealing with disappointment, I learned that I had to find some support. I needed friends to show me support. Now, here's what happens when someone goes through divorce. If you've never been through a divorce, you're not going to understand this. But those of you who are listening, most of you have blended families on this podcast, and you've been through a divorce, and you're going to know what I'm talking about. When you go through a divorce and you experience that weight of disappointment, you tend to project. And projection means that you take your feelings and you project them on someone else. It doesn't mean that the other person is thinking that. You're just projecting that. It doesn't mean that they're feeling that. You're projecting those feelings. That's what you tend to do when you go through a divorce. If you're experiencing this disappointment that I experienced greatly, then here's what you feel. That those friends around you are also disappointed in you. That's the projection. You feel like they, maybe not saying it to you, but they're disappointed because of what's happened. You project that. You have to overcome that, because here's what I discovered. I'm not all knowing. I don't know what everyone's thinking. And how arrogant of me to think that I know what someone else is thinking and they're disappointed in me. That wasn't the case at all. I discovered that my true friends were still my true friends. But when you seek support after you've gone through something very disappointing, you may need to go to those close friends, because this is what I did. You may need to go to those close friends and let them know that you're at a very vulnerable time and you appreciate their friendship, that they're still friends. And if someone turns their back on you, because there will be those people, and acts like, you've fallen and I've never gone through that myself. Listen, you don't need them anyways as a friend. So move on. Sometimes when you go through a different season, the people in the season that you just went through were only for that season. They're not for this season. So be willing to move on. But find some support and some friends who are still your friends. Now, when you go through this disappointment, here's the next thing. set some healthy boundaries, okay? Set some healthy boundaries for yourself, but you're going to have to set some healthy boundaries for your exes as well. If you've gone through a difficult time and you're feeling the weight of disappointment and you've gone through a divorce and you're still having to navigate the world with an ex, many of you have said to me that you have an ex that loves to lay on you guilt. They like to gaslight you. They like to act as if it's your fault. They may even try to isolate you from your own children. You have to set healthy boundaries, not just physical boundaries where you're not near each other. You've got to set some boundaries around your own emotions and your mental thinking. You can't let that person manipulate how you feel about yourself. You can't let them become the influence that makes you feel like everything was your fault. You're such a bad person. You have a reason to be disappointed. The kids are disappointed in you. You've ruined our whole family. You can't walk that path. That's just bringing you down, down, down. You've got to set some healthy boundaries with people in your life, especially your exes. Then let's go to the next one. There comes a time when you have to get real honest and reflect on things that you've learned. I am of this opinion that when two people go through a divorce, that two people have faults. Two people have issues that were a part of why they went through divorce. Seldom have I ever come across someone who was totally at fault, 100% at fault. There's always two sides. Now, it may lean heavily on someone else, but you can still say there are some things I could have done differently. So, sit down and reflect on the lessons you learn. I'm going to encourage you to do this. I'm going to encourage you to journal. I'm going to encourage you to start writing down, and this is how I do it. As a Christian, I pray about it, and I say, God, help me with things that I should have done differently so that I can learn from, so that I don't bring them into my new marriage. Now, I'm 15 years into this new marriage, but I spend some time trying to learn from my mistakes. That's what I'm asking you to do. Reflect on some lessons that you learn. Journal. Now, when you do this, be both positive and negative. Jot down the things that you should have done differently. Jot down the things that could have caused a disruption in your relationship. Maybe you were cold. Maybe you were your temper. Maybe you were verbal and you used tones and you said things. Maybe those kind of things push the other person away. Jot those down. Jot down the positive things. These are the things that I did. These are the things that I tried to do. These are the positive things in that relationship. Learn from that. Bring them into your new relationship. Reflect on those things. And then create some new goals. Create some new goals. When I say that, I'm talking about something different. I've got a friend who's gone through a divorce and he's totally moved across the United States and he's created this new goal. I'll never do it, but this was his new goal. He has taken up biking. I'd rather do just about anything than take up biking, but that's what he did. He's taken up biking. Some people take up running. Not going to do that either. Some people take up just going to the gym. I enjoy doing that. But here's the big phase that people are going through today. I've got people all around me who have taken up pickleball. I've got people that I know closely who have or meeting people because they've been through a divorce and now they're ready to step back out there and meet other people and they've joined these pickleball leagues. Well, you get the point. Create some new goals and new activities for you, new fun things to do. Someone else, I had a friend and I kind of laugh at this. I wish I had a video of it and I'd show it to you, but he's the most uncoordinated person I've ever seen. But as he's going out for new relationships, he's decided he needs to learn how to dance. Well, I think it's hilarious. If you ever saw him, you would too. But he's taking dance lessons. I can't wait to see how that turns out. But good for him, right? Good for him for stepping out and trying to find something new. So create some new activities and redirect your life a little way. I think that will help you as you begin to deal with the disappointment that you went through. And then here's another one. This was hard on me. I hate to admit it, but can I? I initially had a difficult time forgiving. I felt there were some areas that I was wronged and I was carrying that wrong. I forgot that the Bible says that God says, let me handle that. I forgot that God says, vengeance is mine, says the Lord. I can take care of that better than you can take care of that. Once I released that and said, God, really, you can handle it better than I can. I'm going to turn that over to you. Once I decided to do that, that was like a big weight off of my shoulders. I didn't have to hold someone else responsible. It's very liberating when you learn to practice forgiveness. And then establishing a routine. I didn't know why psychologists often say that one of the most important things you can do as you get your life back on path is to begin some routines. And the reason why is because structure helps you focus and it gives you a sense of what is normal from a very tumultuous time that you've been through, creating a path that's pretty bland at sometimes, but it's the same road every day. That sense of being normal will help you find more joy and fulfillment, psychologists say. So, last thing, stay open to healing. There are still areas that surprise me sometimes that pop up. It's like you have a wound that never healed. Sometimes you don't even know that that wound never healed. It's like hidden under your shirt, and then all of a sudden you see it in the mirror, and you're wondering, how long has that been there? You still have some things that need to heal. Don't be surprised when those pop up. Be surprised when things come to your mind. I sometimes, even today, will all of a sudden, out of the blue, grieve. I just sometimes feel grief. Have you ever experienced that? Sometimes my mind will go back, and it's very real. If you've been through it, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Your mind will go back to your former life when it was good. When it was good. How many of you have told me this? Your mind goes back to when it was good. It's so amazing how in our minds we forget after time the bad. And you go back and you remember the good, and then you wonder, why did we ever have to go through that? Well, you've forgotten why, and you remember the good. And when you remember the good, nothing wrong with that, but sometimes it causes grief because you miss it, or you feel disappointed that that didn't last. So be open to healing when you go through those times and deal with those. And to deal with them, you may need help. Nothing wrong with a good Christian friend or a good Christian counselor to help you through those times. So, if you've been through a divorce, you're creating a blended family, I want you to be as healthy as you can. So this new blended family and starting over and happiness that awaits you is going to be fulfillment like you've never experienced. But to do that, you've got to turn loose of some of that disappointment and learn to deal with it. So thank you for joining me. I hope that you go and share our podcast, like our podcast. This is Jim Cunningham with Faith Influencer.